Hello, everyone. Welcome to Frank Analysis. I am your host, Franco. I'm joined today by a special guest named Sun. We've talked about this issue that you see on the title there several times, and I think that she is really great on this issue, and you guys are going to learn a lot from her perspective. You've read the title. We're talking about misogyny, we're talking about the reality of sex work. I think that there's a lot of things that a lot of us males need to be conscious of um, in terms of what women go through and in terms of the reality of sex work. A lot of people tend to say that they support sex work, and they're saying that without considering the realities of what goes on behind the scenes, the violence, the rape, the trauma that a lot of these women go through, and a lot of, probably the majority of them, are doing this against their will because they have no other choice. It's all about survival. But Son, it's really great to have you on. How are you?
Hey Franco, I'm doing good.
So I want to first show you a bit of this interview that Chris Hedges did. He's interviewing Rachel Moran, who's an author of a book called Paid For: My Journey Through Prostitution. And she's talking about her experiences that she went through as a prostitute. So let me share the screen with you real quick. And I'm just going to start off right here, and let's just take a listen on what she's saying and the experiences that she had. And I want to hear your thoughts on.
I want to talk a little bit about the myths that those who are outside the industry don't understand. Um, it has become hip among certain segments to talk about sex workers and the rights of sex workers, all of which, by the time you get to the end of this book, are just imploded. You yourself came from a dysfunctional family. Both of your parents had mental health issues. Your mother was an undiagnosed schizophrenic. Your father committed suicide. You grew up in extreme poverty, you and your siblings. And in the book, you say that there are two primary routes by which women become prostituted. What are they?
Well, I think certainly from what I have seen with my own eyes and also the research that I've seen in the years since I left, sexual abuse features very, very highly. And also there's a whole array really of different types of marginalizations. Like here in the United States, race plays a huge role in this. For example, one of the women I work with, an African American woman from Minnesota, Vanita Carter, she tells me that in the facility she runs, there are about 350 to 400 young girls and young women coming through her doors every year. Now, in a city where you've got 10% black people, you've obviously got 5% black females, and yet over 70% of the young women and girls presenting in her project are young black females. So you can't look at that in the context of what's going on in the United States and not immediately see that racial marginalization is funneling these girls straight into prostitution. I have never seen anyone come to prostitution out of a circumstance that wasn't itself in some way, shape, or form a negative influence in their lives. In my case, it was, like you say, poverty.
And homelessness. You were homeless.
I was homeless at the time I went into prostitution, right. Yeah. I had left home at 14 and I went into prostitution the following year.
Let's talk a little bit about.
So I just want to get your thoughts there on what she said about the reasons why some women go into prostitution. Do you think that a lot of people who say that they support sex workers, that this is something that they're conscious of when they're saying that? What do you think?
No, I think a lot of people that say they support sex workers, or say like I support sex work, I don't think they're thinking about like the people who are actually involved in it. Like I don't think they're thinking about their circumstances, their backgrounds, anything, the necessities that they lack. I honestly just think that they're caring more about the industry. Honestly, people who say things like that, they're not thinking about the realities that women who are involved in sex work, um, they're just not thinking about the things that they actually have to go through and why.
Yeah, like
Um,
like if they had a real choice, right? If things were better in our system, if they could have any job that they wanted, I'm pretty sure they would choose to have that job over sex work, right? And this is including the porn industry. This is including OnlyFans, right?
yeah, exactly. I feel like if you ask a lot of people who are in the industry, and I don't want to make any assumptions, but a lot of times it does come from necessity. Like these people, sometimes, people make jokes and stuff about it, like I need to pay my rent, but
Yeah,
that's the honest truth. Like they have bills they need to pay, they have school that they need to pay for, all of these things, and they can't just pay for these things just from like working a regular job. Like who's going to pay off student loans from working at like a fast food restaurant or waitressing? Like the amount that you get paid in proportion to the bills you have to pay for, it's ridiculous. And that's why a lot of people go into prostitution or, stripping or something like OnlyFans, because I mean the payoff can be pretty great. But again,
in the
they're
short
not.
term, perhaps.
Yeah, but like I said, like they're not going into that because who's dreaming of becoming a prostitute, a stripper, a cam girl when they're like 5, 6, 7 years old?
Yeah,
Children aren't dreaming of these things. That we have dreams, we have goals when we're little. We don't dream to actually like go into a field like that. So
right. And as we're gonna learn more of in this interview, like what happens after that? Like after they go into it, because they go into it because they're in a state of desperation, only to go through more trauma, and then they have to deal with that, as Rachel Moran has had to go through. So let's listen a little bit more of what she has to say here.
The experience of prostitution, which you dissect, I think, brilliantly in the book. You first of all talk about the kind of coping mechanisms. One of the things about sexual abuse survivors you point out in the book is that they've already become, in essence, desensitized or kind of numb to their own experience, which is one of the fundamental coping mechanisms that you say prostitutes need in order to survive.
Absolutely. You have to dissociate. You have to split yourself off from the reality of what's currently happening. So that if you are having your body used by, could be, in my case, it was up to 10 men a day when I was on the streets. You've got to be able to shut off from that. You just couldn't keep on doing it unless you could just, literally what you do is you pretend that it's not happening.
Right.
That's what I always did. I just shut it out, like I was, I don't know, some warped form of an actress.
There's a passage, I'm going to read it and have you comment. It is difficult to describe how hollow a woman feels after she has been used sexually by 10 different men. Of course, the experience rarely stopped at the agreed upon hand relief or oral sex. Even when a man has accepted that he will not be putting his penis in you, he often has no compunction about shoving his fingers or other objects in you, and mauling you, and biting you, and trying to shove his tongue down your throat, and everywhere else. I know by the rabid dog-like behavior of one particular client that he'd have liked nothing better than if he'd bit and sucked my nipples till they gushed blood. Violence is an endemic part of prostitution, and I think you argue that is part of every single act of prostitution, even if it doesn't involve that kind of savagery. I mean, you break down, and maybe you can do that for us before we begin, I think 3 different characteristics of men who use prostitutes. What are those 3 characteristics?
Well, you have your men who actively get off on hurting you and watching you being hurt, right? And inflicting pain.
I think you
So,
say that's about 30%, you're guessing?
roughly, yeah, from my experience. Then you have your men who are aware, of course, that what's going on is not right, not humane, but they choose willfully to ignore that. And you have your other men who just don't seem to have that in their minds at all. They don't seem to understand that what's happening is not something that should be going on. But even having said that, those same men would know that they wouldn't want to walk into a brothel and find their sister sitting on the bed. So I do believe that there's a good deal of denial going on there. To get back to the point you were making about violence, people miss the biggest part of the picture, in my opinion, which is that prostitution is violence in and of itself. And people will say, oh, well, why? And that's not true, and how can that be so, and all of this. Look, the bald reality is, and I said this in an interview recently, to put your hands on another person when you know they don't want your hands there, and to put your penis into the orifices of somebody's body when you know that they don't want your penis inside them or near them, that is pathological behavior. And money doesn't erase that. Money does not have some kind of magical quality that can take away the essence of a person's behavior or an exchange between two people. It doesn't have that kind of power.
You have a passage.
So I'm just going to pause right there and get your thoughts, San. What do you think about what Rachel Moran said there about how prostitution is violence?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, what she was saying about, men conducting these sexual acts with women despite knowing that they probably most likely don't even want to have sex with them, but still, what's the word?
Like
They,
they
they,
want to go through with it anyway because they have a sexual urge that they want to fulfill, right?
well, not just that, but they think it's okay because they're like, oh, well, she accepted my money. Like, this is an equal
Right.
exchange. That's not an equal exchange. You think that somebody accepting money that they need to survive, is them truly consenting to conducting sexual acts with you? No. Just because a woman accepts money from you does not mean that she wants to actually have sex with you. She's not doing it because she likes you. She's not doing it because she wants to. She's doing it out of necessity.
Yeah. And that's the argument that Rachel Moran also makes in this interview with Chris Hedges, is that prostitution, like, it's not real consent. Like, is it real consent if it's not truly their choice? Like, they're doing this out of survival, right? What do you think?
Yeah, and I agree. And a lot of people will make the argument like, oh, well, if they didn't really want to do that, then why are they in that field? Again, do they understand like how hard it is to actually pursue like certain career paths? Like I've heard of many, women who, for example, may do stripping. For example, they have aspirations of becoming nurses or going to law school, like the end goal was not stripping. It was just a stepping stone, right? And so, but that's something that it gives them a lot of money. It gives them money to pay for school, to pay for rent. If they have children, to pay for childcare services. So again, like a lot of these decisions that women make, it's purely out of necessity. And I honestly think there's more than two parts to this. There's layers, but part of it is, society and the system not, providing basic necessities for people.
Mm-hmm.
So free healthcare, free childcare, other things that would just make it so much easier for people to actually pursue the career that they want to, free education, but also just a lack of like mental health services and mental health support. I think that mental health seriously is probably like the number one killer. It's honestly an epidemic. It causes so many people to go into certain paths that they've decided to do because they see no other way out, and they have so much unresolved trauma. It other than that, it leads to uh, physical health issues. It's just so many like underlying layers
Right.
of just issues that fall underneath the whole industry of sex work.
Right. Right. And like this is just looking at prostitution too. Like the abuse that people in the porn industry also go through. Um that's a whole nother thing. Like Chris Hedges or someone could have an interview with somebody about the realities. And there are interviews out there about that. Um like how they have to go above and beyond like things that they're really not comfortable with doing. And like you mentioned, these a lot of these women have other goals in mind. So that's adding to the other stress and trauma that they have when they're going through school, right? They're doing stripping or they're doing prostitution to pay through their education. Like that is a sign of a failed state, right? And it's happening here in the richest country of the world, and
Yeah, I agree.
it's
I
go
think
ahead.
a big part of like a lot of the blame is shifted. It's shifted into the women, right? Like men or other people, out there will say, "Oh, well, if she really didn't want to do this, she doesn't need to," or like they blame shift onto the women, like that it's their fault you know for them to even choose being prostitutes. Like it's honestly the fault of the system, um, and a big part of well, we already know that the system is run by men, and a big part of the problem is men just kind of who obviously want to satisfy their sexual urges and just kind of normalizing this, right? By saying like, I
Yeah.
support sex work, I support the sex industry. You support the sex industry, right? You don't support women. You support having sex. That's really what it is. Because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you don't care about those women. You don't care that they're having all their needs met. You don't care that they're paying their bills. You don't care that they're following their dreams, getting a career that they want, taking care of their children. That's not what you care about.
It's looking at them as objects rather than human beings, right? They're
Yeah,
not
it's
putting
literally
themselves in their
objectifying women.
shoes. Yeah, being aware of their struggles.
Yeah, because like
And
she said, they don't want to see their sister in a brothel, right?
yeah, or their mother or somebody they care about, right?
Yeah,
And
so it's not
that's
respect for what they do. It's not respect for women, that's for sure.
so that's what's missing here in our current state of our current society, right? That elevated level of consciousness where you're putting yourself in other people's shoes and are thinking to yourself, why are they doing this? They must be like really desperate if they're in this situation to begin with. Is it even is it even okay for me to be having any sexual acts with them if they're just doing this out of survival, right? I think that this is what people need to be thinking more about. Um, now, I'm just going to show you one last clip here from this interview. Get your thoughts on that. Um, oh, before I do that, I just want to ask you because people are going to say, "Oh, well, no one forced them to go into prostitution." What do you say to people who give a response like that?
Um, well, to that I say, what was their next best option? What was their next best option when they can't pay for food on the table, when they can't pay their rent, when they can't even pay to go to school? Like what else were they supposed to do? Just live on the street? Like it's like they have no option. There's like, oh, well, why did they decide to do that? I mean, how many options were presented to them, especially when they come from low income households, when they come from households where there's already like a lot of violence, like this woman having um an undiagnosed schizophrenic mother, and a father who committed suicide. You know, there aren't a lot of options for people who grew up in very difficult households. So the reality is that they don't really have an option, you know, not if they want to survive. And it's human nature. It's just any animal's natural instinct to survive.
And for the people that have been following this channel for a while and have seen me talk about the Rona and the jab, it's like if you're on the same page as me, and like T Lab, then you would understand when people say, "Oh, no one forced those workers to get the jab," when you know damn well that their workplace forced them to do it, the system forced them to do it. They had to survive. They had to keep their job. So if they actually had a real choice, you probably wouldn't have gotten it, right? If these women had a real choice, they wouldn't be in prostitution, right? They wouldn't be in sex work. So I want to show you this last clip here, San, and then I'll get your thoughts on that, and then we can talk more about misogyny.
Sadly,
in Germany.
in some parts of the world, like Germany.
Well, you write about Australia and Germany, and there are a couple things that.
All right, so in this part, they're talking about the industrialization of prostitution.
So you can just imagine, and we're already seeing it, sadly, shamefully, in some parts of the world, like Germany.
Well, you write about Australia and Germany, and there are a couple things that surprised me. One is that it is no dent on terms of there's legal and illegal. I mean, of course, Germany now, it's industrial prostitution with multi-story brothels. I can't remember the figures, but it was like
12 stories high.
12 stories high. What is it, 1 million men a year or something are serviced. These women are mostly trafficked in from Eastern Europe and Asia and other places. But that doesn't put a dent into what is illegal prostitution, and you explained why. Why is that?
Well, in Germany, you have an estimate, and I believe it's a very conservative estimate, of 450,000 women and girls prostituting. 44 of them have stepped forward to sign as registered. So here we have a situation where the whole world believes that prostitution ought to be regulated, legislated, and all of this. But the reality of what's happening in Germany is only a pitiful handful of women were prepared to register and get the benefits that go along with that, the social security and health benefits and all this. Because the bald reality is we don't want to be labelled prostitutes. Women don't want that whore stamp, as I call it, on us forever. And the illegal trade absolutely booms anywhere where you legalize, because what happens immediately is that demand massively increases. We've seen it in New Zealand, in certain states, in Australia, in just all over the place. Anywhere that has legalized or decriminalized, which is two sides.
Sexual tourism is like Thailand.
Oh yeah.
There, at one point you talk in the book about mothers who would come out before Christmas, poor mothers.
Yeah.
Or was it? And the other date was what, his first communion, or when?
That was really sad.
Yeah, so in that part, they were pretty much talking about how the industrialization of sex work and the legalization of it doesn't really solve the issue of what these women are going through. Like they're still getting like effed over by the higher ups, the people who will own these industries, and as long as we still have like this capitalist system, as long as we still have this low level of consciousness, like there's still going to be suffering there, right? There's still going to be women that are going to feel the desperation to do this stuff, and like they're not feeling safe, like as she explains in this interview. Like there's still violence that happens in these hotel rooms when it's like rich people that are paying for like these expensive prostitutes. And she mentioned that her and other people that did prostitution, they felt safer being out in the streets than being in a hotel room or in a room alone with a rich man, because at least in the streets they have more control over the environment they can run away if things get out of hand. So I wanted to get your thoughts on those two things there: the industrialization of prostitution, legalizing it, and um, still having prostitution in like this like fancy way with rich people, like that's still like not a safe way to do it. What are your thoughts?
I feel like the industrialization of prostitution just kind of further kind of just controls and cages women, you know, like now, like you said, they're just changing the setting, right? So now women have to meet men in very private areas. So as you said, they probably can't run away easily if they feel unsafe. And also, you know, I kind of don't want to gloss over the fact that this guy just said that a lot of women from like Eastern Europe are trafficked.
Hmm.
Does that mean that like are they going to stop that if they regulate it, or
Exactly that.
is that sounds like it's still going to be a problem?
Right.
So, and now what? Now they're not in the streets anymore. Now they're trapped in a room with like a rich guy or a guy that, you know, is visiting from another country and he heard, oh, I can have sex with women here in Germany. Like it's kind of mind boggling how people are just in support of this and they don't think about
You're right, without
women's
addressing
safety.
the other stuff.
Yeah,
Without,
exactly.
and a lot of people in the alt media, independent media space, or in the Twitch space, like they brag about this stuff. They're like, yeah, you know, I went to Germany and I did all this stuff with other stuff. Like you are a political commentator. You're supposed to be spreading awareness about what's happening in the world, and you're talking about that without first talking about sex traffic, without first talking about abuse and all this other stuff.
Well, if they're
And
immediately saying like, "Oh, I went to Germany and had sex with all these women," I hope they know that by, you know, wording things like that, they're literally objectifying women. You're
right,
just going there and you're treating it like, "Oh yeah, what a great tourist, um, like like experience I had. Like it was part of the tour. Like that's crazy to me."
right. Or when people go to Thailand to do that, or to any of these other countries that are in the global south to do that.
Yeah, people just don't stop to think like, why are they doing this?
And a lot of these places, especially in the global south, are war torn. There's a lot of sex work that happens as a result of war. That's not getting discussed enough in the alt media, independent media space. Um, so, what do you think is the reason for this, son? Like, let's also tie this into misogyny. Do you think that a lot of this has to do with misogyny? Is it just overall a lack of collective consciousness? What are your thoughts?
I definitely think this is a result of misogyny and, you know, don't get me wrong, I definitely believe in like, you know, sex freedom, like women having the freedom and feeling safe enough to have sex with whoever they want. And also, you know, being able to show their body as they please, dress as however they want, express themselves however they want. But what it really comes down to is like women's safety and also like how prostitution objectifies women. And I know that the media and a lot of other, you know, things try to spin that narrative and change it to, oh, well, you know, women are strong and they can be like sexy and it's not a bad thing. Yeah, of course, but you don't care that women can seriously experience like violence in a room when they're having sex with a man, or the fact that they don't even want to do this and they have to dissociate out of their body because they can't stand the fact that they're having sex with a stranger to pay rent. Um, and yeah, all of this just kind of circles back to the objectification and hatred of women. So misogyny.
So where do you think that this all stems from? Like this objectification of women? Like, is it just something that's embedded in uh, the man's mind? Is it just like ignorance? What do you think?
Um, I think this probably predates to like times of war. It
Well, we're
definitely
still
like it
having it
stems
now,
from
like times of war, but I think you
oh
mean like prehistoric.
yeah, but honestly, all this just stems from society, the patriarchy. Literally, because it at the end of the day, it is a lot of men that look at women and don't see human beings. They see objects. There's literally been like I think there's been some like videos or articles that kind of show how some men they look at women and a specific part of their brain either lights up or doesn't light up, and that same I guess pattern is shown when they look at like a lamp, for instance. So their
Whoa.
brain activity will be the same. Them looking at an inanimate object or them looking at a woman, it shows the same pattern of activity, meaning that they see women as objects.
So like looking at like an accessory pretty much that they want to add and to show off to the rest of the world.
Yeah, and to just talk about like those commentators who are like, I went to Germany and I had sex with all these women and it was great and I love supporting the sex industry. You're lining like whoever's her boss in that situation or controlling whatever she does. You're lining his pockets. I have no idea how much of the money she's actually getting.
Yeah.
That's another thing to think about.
Is there anything that you want men to be more conscious of in regards to like is there anything that you want men to know more about women to increase their understanding of them? What are your thoughts?
Um, Other than just looking at women like people,
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, I just think that something that a lot of men, all people really, men and women, but men especially, they need to learn how to empathize more. I think this is something that a lot of, you know, straight men are not able to do so easily. And that definitely stems from toxic masculinity. I'm sure a lot of men are raised to not react a certain way, to not feel certain ways, to not say certain things to each other because then they're made fun of it for it, or they get a beating for it. And I think, men growing up like that around each other by different men that react in these violent ways because they don't agree with how they might express themselves or how they might think. I think they really need to take a step back and look at the root problem, which is toxic masculinity, the patriarchy, misogyny, all of these things. And all this can slowly but surely, hopefully, kind of be chipped away at if men just take a moment to empathize with women. So thinking things like, why is she doing this? Does she really want to do this? Would I really want to do this? I'm sure men would say like, yeah, I want to have sex with a lot of women. I'm sure you want to have sex with women by your choice. Can you imagine men having to have sex with women and it's not even their choice? Let's say it's women that I don't know, they're just not interested in, but they have no choice but to have sex with them. Can they even imagine that? They don't like to think that way because men want to feel like they're in control. That's a part of, I think, toxic masculinity. And so that's why they don't see things from a woman's perspective. They're just always constantly thinking like, well, as long as I'm the one in control, everything's fine.
You think, well, in the interview that I showed earlier with Rachel Moran, she's talking about how some people who are having sex with prostitutes. Based on her experience, a lot of them were just unaware of the discomfort that she would feel, or that some of the other people that she knew that were prostitutes would feel, and that it's all pretty much like a sexual selfishness. And this can happen like outside of sex work too, where men are just unaware of the discomfort that the woman feels, and then she just does it because she feels coerced, and at the end of the day, that's not consensual. Right? It's not really a choice if she's doing it because she feels like she has to, or she felt pressured. And that's all stemming from a lack of consciousness, right?
I do believe a lot of things stem from a lack of consciousness, but I don't necessarily know if I believe that men are that unaware. I do think that men must have an idea. They must have a feeling. I'm pretty sure people kind of have an idea that if someone's not interested or if someone doesn't want to do anything, there's like these very specific cues that people can give off, right?
Mm.
So I don't think they're completely unaware. I honestly think it's just kind of turning a blind eye, because if they have to in that moment,
Because
they're
their urge is like their sense to do it is just stronger
yeah, and
than.
the thing is a lot of men can, kind of file that under, oh, well, I'm a man, I have my sexual urges. That's, I don't think that's right. I think, we as human beings, we're at a part right now where, we're continuously, slowly but surely elevating, constantly evolving, learning more, getting smarter. There's so much that we've achieved. And yet we can't control ourselves. We still give in to these like very physical bodily urges, despite knowing that we might really be hurting another person. I just don't think that that's very humane,
Mm.
so I think this is something that all people, men, not just men, but men and women, but based on the topic we're talking about right now, men, they need to work on. So like you said, elevating consciousness and
Yeah,
being mindful.
it's not discussed enough, I don't think, in school systems. But thankfully, like from I'm seeing, like even like on TikTok and stuff, there's more people that are spreading awareness about this, and more men having these conversations with women, or becoming more aware about this issue. Um, so I mean, I'm starting to see, the awareness increase. I don't know if you're also seeing that on like on TikTok, like more people talking about this, and women calling out things that men are unaware of. And like sometimes they show like the woman talking to the boyfriend, they're like, oh well, I didn't know about that, sorry. Not just like with stuff on sex, but just like other things, like in the way that they communicate, like there might be like some things that goes over the man's head. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think all of this just kind of stems from, like, as you said, well, raising consciousness for one, like that's important, but also a part of that is, like I said earlier, empathizing. Um, we're all humans. We all face difficulties. We all, experience a range of emotions: happiness, sadness, anger, frustration. Um, and I really think that with situations like this, there really needs to be understanding
Mhm.
and seeing other people as, people, as humans, as like living beings that deserve respect.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Any final thoughts you want to leave the audience with, son?
I guess what I already said before is just, being mindful, empathizing with your fellow people, understanding where they're coming from, trying to like take a second and, rather than being overtaken by any urges that you have, just trying to take a second and, try to
Be
understand,
mindful.
yeah, just understand where other people are coming from, understanding their situations. I think a lot of the violence that we see in the world is because people don't want to take the time to understand somebody else's side. People are so quick to either
Yeah.
throw stones, cast
How they're
judgment.
about to inflict harm on somebody else. And that when they inflict that harm, that other person is going to feel anger too. And they're probably going to want to take that anger out back at that person, right? Or maybe take it out on somebody else and not even be conscious of that.
Right.
Yeah, well, San, thank you very much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. And I would love to have more conversations like this. I think there's still a lot more to this topic that needs to be discussed. And to everybody else, stay informed. Take care.